Remember those Saturday mornings when you'd sit in front of the TV with your bowl of cereal, ready for some good old-fashioned cartoon fun? Yeah, well, sometimes those cartoons decide to absolutely traumatize you instead. I'm talking about episodes so dark, so disturbing, and so wildly inappropriate that you have to wonder what the writers were thinking. Did they lose a bet? Were they going through something? We may never know. From cannibalism in school cafeterias to organ harvesting aliens to episodes that got straight up banned for being too intense, these cartoons cross lines most shows wouldn't even approach. Some of these aired once and never again. Others somehow made it to regular rotation before someone finally said, "Wait, are we showing this to children?" And yes, every single one of these episodes is real, documented, and probably still giving people nightmares. I'm Mike with List 25, and today I'm counting down 25 cartoon episodes that were too dark for kids. Buckle up, because some of these are absolutely unhinged. But before we dive in, smash all the buttons and make sure to show us some love and hit subscribe. 25. CatDog. Teeth for Two. CatDog was already a bizarre show about a conjoined cat-dog hybrid, but Teeth for Two took things to a whole new level of disturbing. The episode kicks off when Cat and Dog realize that whatever happens to one's teeth affects the others, and naturally they handle this like mature adults. Yeah, I'm kidding. They declare war on each other's mouths. I'm talking chewing on aluminum foil, taking a blowtorch to teeth, and using a car to yank them out. Painful? Absolutely. Appropriate for kids? Questionable at best. The cherry on top of this nightmare Sunday is when Cat tries to brush Dog's teeth while he's sleeping and emerges from inside Dog's mouth looking like a skinless flesh monster straight out of a horror film. The image haunted a generation of viewers and became instant nightmare fuel. Nickelodeon really looked at this episode and said, "Yeah, kids will love this." They were wrong. So wrong. 24. The Simpsons. Nightmare Cafeteria. The Simpsons has never been afraid to push boundaries, but Nightmare Cafeteria went straight past the boundary and into full-blown cannibalism territory. Springfield Elementary has an overcrowding problem, and the teachers come up with a truly genius solution. Just start cooking and eating the students. Problem solved. Sure, the Treehouse of Horror episodes are supposed to be darker and, more horror-themed, but watching Bart and his classmates get turned into cafeteria meals just hits different. The teachers don't just threaten it as a joke, they actually do it. Kids start disappearing one by one, ending up on lunch trays with a side of mashed potatoes. What makes this especially unsettling is that it takes a place kids are supposed to feel safe, school, and turns it into a literal nightmare. The satire is there. The dark comedy is classic Simpsons. But watching teachers casually discuss which student would make the best stew, that's the stuff therapy sessions are made of. 23. The Fairly OddParents. It's a Wishful Life. The Fairly OddParents was usually a fun, lighthearted show about a kid with magical fairy godparents. Then, It's a Wishful Life came along and said, "Let's emotionally destroy children instead." After getting yelled at for his good deeds, Timmy decides everyone would be better off without him and wishes himself out of existence. Cue the saddest alternate timeline ever, where it turns out everyone actually is thriving without him. Ouch. But wait, it gets darker. Jorgen tries to send Timmy to a place that's basically cartoon hell. Yes, hell. In a kid's show, Timmy spirals into an existential crisis, questioning whether his existence is worth the suffering of others, and he actually accepts that maybe he should just cease to exist. Sure, it turns out to be a test in the end, but that doesn't make it any less heavy for a show aimed at elementary schoolers. 22. Looney Tunes. Duck Amuck. Looney Tunes was known for cartoon violence, but Duck Amuck decided to go for psychological warfare instead. In this 1953 short, Daffy gets absolutely tormented by an unseen animator who keeps changing reality on him. One second he's a cowboy, the next he's in the Arctic. Then suddenly he's got no body, just a head floating in space. The whole cartoon is basically Daffy screaming at an invisible force that keeps messing with him, erasing him, redrawing him, and making his life a living nightmare. There's no escape, no way to fight back, and no relief. Just 7 minutes of pure existential horror disguised as comedy. What makes this genuinely unsettling is the complete helplessness. Daffy has zero control over his own reality, and watching him slowly lose his mind while the animator toys with him is hilarious and deeply uncomfortable at the same time. Kids laugh, but somewhere in the back of their minds they learned what it feels like to have no agency whatsoever. 21. Invader Zim, Dark Harvest. Invader Zim was always delightfully weird, but Dark Harvest cranked the disturbing factor up to 11 and never looked back. This episode is straight up body horror, and somehow Nickelodeon aired it anyway. Zim realizes his alien biology might blow his cover during a school health inspection, so he does what any logical alien would do. He starts harvesting human organs from his classmates and stuffing them into his own body. I'm talking kidneys, lungs, livers, the whole shebang. He is literally walking around school, stealing children's internal organs and replacing them with random objects like soda cans and teddy bears. The episode ends with Zim stealing Dib's lungs, and the whole thing plays out like a genuine horror movie. How this got past Nickelodeon censors is one of life's greatest mysteries. Kids' cartoons are supposed to teach lessons about friendship and sharing, not organ theft and body horror. This episode said, screw that, and became the stuff of nightmares instead. 20. Captain Planet, Mind Pollution. Captain Planet was all about teaching kids to recycle, save the whales, and protect the environment. Wholesome stuff, right? Then they dropped an episode about drug addiction that featured a literal child dying on screen. Yeah, you heard me right. In this episode, the villain, Verminous Scum, introduces a drug called Bliss to the community, and everyone gets hooked, including Linka's cousin, Boris. The drug messes with their minds so badly that Scum convinces Linka and Boris to attack their own friends, preventing them from summoning Captain Planet. Here's where it gets dark. Boris takes more Bliss and overdoses right there in Linka's arms. A child dies from a drug overdose in a cartoon aimed at elementary schoolers. Captain Planet shows up furious. No puns, no jokes, just raw anger, and defeats Scum, but the trauma doesn't go away. Boris is gone, and everyone just has to live with that. This wasn't subtle anti-drug messaging. This is full-on drugs will kill you horror, and it left an entire generation of kids absolutely shaken. 19. The Powerpuff Girls. See me, feel me, know me. The Powerpuff Girls usually beat up monsters, saved the day, and went home in time for bedtime. Then See Me, Feel Me, Know Me came along and got itself banned in the US for being way too controversial. This musical episode somehow managed to tick off multiple groups at once, which is almost impressive. The episode featured destroyed buildings that looked suspiciously like crucifixes, a hippie character that bore a striking resemblance to Jesus, and a sequence called Hear Me Fathers that used stroboscopic effects. You know, the kind of flashing lights that can trigger seizures. Nothing says kids' entertainment like potential medical emergencies. The religious imagery didn't sit well with censors, and the seizure-inducing effects definitely didn't help its case. The episode got pulled from US broadcasts entirely, though it did air internationally and eventually made its way to DVD in 2009. So yeah, if you wanted to watch the banned Powerpuff Girls episode, you had to import it like contraband. 18. Rocko's Modern Life. To Heck and Back. Rocko's Modern Life was already pretty subversive for a kid's show, but To Heck and Back took things to a genuinely dark place. The episode sends Heifer on a journey to the afterlife, specifically to Heck, which is obviously just a censored hell, and the whole thing plays out like a fever dream. Heifer ends up in this nightmarish underworld run by a character called Peaches, the Dark Underlord, and the imagery is bizarre and menacing throughout. I remember this episode. We're talking fire, brimstone, and tormented souls, all wrapped up in that signature Rocko's Modern Life weirdness. What makes it even darker? The episode ends with a sinister implication that the Choky Chicken restaurant was killing its employees. Casual murder implications in a kid's cartoon? Yeah, totally normal stuff. This episode didn't just push the boundaries, it bulldozed right through them and kept going. 17. Static Shock, Jimmy. Static Shock tackled serious issues, but Jimmy went somewhere most kids' cartoons wouldn't dare to go, a school shooting. Yeah, a kids' superhero show did an episode about gun violence in schools, and it was absolutely devastating. Jimmy is a shy kid who gets relentlessly bullied by Nick and his friends. After enduring endless torment, Jimmy disappears, and when Virgil and his father find him, they discover he's planning to bring a gun to school to confront his bullies. The confrontation scene is genuinely terrifying. Jimmy is sobbing uncontrollably while Richie desperately tries to talk him down. When Nick's friends try to tackle Jimmy, the gun goes off and Richie gets shot. He survives, but the damage is done. This wasn't a fantasy villain or a monster of the week. This was real-world trauma playing out in a superhero cartoon, and it hit way too close to home for comfort. The episode didn't pull any punches, and it left viewers, kids and adults alike, absolutely shaken. 16. The World of David the Gnome. The Mountains of Beyond. School shootings were already a lot for kids shows, but buckle up because I'm about to talk about a series finale that decided to teach children all about death. The World of David the Gnome was sweet and gentle, the kind gnome who helps animals and taught life lessons. Cozy stuff. Perfect for young kids. Then, the series finale showed up and wrecked everyone emotionally. The Mountains of Beyond deals with aging, mortality, and death in a way that was far too heavy for the show's usual tone. David and his wife face the reality that their time is coming to an end, and they make a journey to the mountains to die. There's no sugarcoating it, no magical resurrection, no happy twist. They say their goodbyes, lie down together, and pass away peacefully. Kids who grew up watching David help forest creatures were suddenly confronted with the reality that even magical beings die. This wasn't just sad, it was devastatingly final. 15. The Loud House. One Flew Over the Loud House. The Loud House episode One Flew Over the Loud House wasn't permanently banned, but it got yanked from reruns faster than you can say pandemic. Around March 2020, Viacom CBS looked at this episode and realized they had a serious problem on their hands. The episode's plot? A flu outbreak that turns the Loud family home into a zombie apocalypse situation. Well, that sounds fun for a cartoon, right? Well, not when the entire world is dealing with an actual pandemic. The storyline hit way too close to home for audiences who were living through lockdowns, mask mandates, and nonstop news coverage about COVID-19. Networks pulled it from rotation to avoid freaking people out even more than they already were. Nobody wanted to watch a cartoon flu outbreak while worrying about a real one. The episode eventually made its way back, but timing really is everything. 14. The Ren and Stimpy Show. Hermit Wren. I've covered some pretty upsetting episodes so far, but Hermit Wren hits different. Ren and Stimpy had plenty of strange, dark moments before, but Hermit Wren crossed way over into genuine psychological horror. Ren decides to isolate himself from the world, and things spiral fast. I'm talking paranoia, misery, and a mental breakdown that gets more unhinged by the minute. The animation makes everything worse by showing his environment getting more grotesque and disturbing. Ren's behavior becomes increasingly erratic, and the whole episode has this depressive, almost claustrophobic atmosphere that is genuinely uncomfortable to watch. Sure, there's absurd horror mixed in, but underneath it all is real psychological torment. Some networks took one look at this episode and decided it was way too intense for kids. Ren and Stimpy loved pushing boundaries, but watching a character spiral into complete mental collapse? That's a hard sell for a children's cartoon. 13. SpongeBob SquarePants. Quarantined Crab. You know how One Flew Over the Loud House got yanked for being too close to real-world pandemic fears? Well, SpongeBob SquarePants had the exact same problem with Quarantined Crab. This episode centers on a virus outbreak at the Krusty Krab, complete with quarantine protocols and widespread panic as the illness spreads among the characters. Sounds like harmless chaos, right? Wrong. The episode had already been completed and was ready to air, but then COVID-19 hit, and suddenly this fictional virus storyline wasn't so funny anymore. Networks pulled it from US rotation immediately. Nobody wanted kids watching SpongeBob deal with a contagious disease while their parents were stressing about masks, lockdown, and staying 6 feet apart. The timing was just too sensitive, and broadcasters decided it would be insensitive or downright alarming to air it. The episode eventually made its way to streaming platforms once the worst of the pandemic passed, but for a while there, Quarantined Crab was off limits entirely. 12. Wonder Pets. Save the Puppy. Alright, so we've had death, school shootings, and pandemic scares. Now let's talk about something way less serious, but somehow still controversial enough to get pulled from TV. Potty humor. The Wonder Pets episode, Save the Puppy, was rarely seen on television because the entire episode revolves around bathroom accidents and bodily functions. The plot literally centers on a puppy dealing with potty training issues, and the humor is exactly what you'd expect. Networks and parents took one look at this and decided it was a big nope. Wonder Pets was aimed at preschoolers and focused on teamwork, problem solving, and helping animals. This episode threw all that wholesomeness out the window in favor of toilet jokes. Despite the show's typically sweet nature, this episode got shoved into the vault and kept out of regular rotation. Apparently bathroom humor was where Nickelodeon drew the line. 11. Bubble Guppies. The police cop-etition. If potty humor was enough to get an episode banned, wait until you hear why the police cop-etition got pulled from Bubble Guppies. This one has nothing to do with content being too crude for kids. This is about timing and social context. The episode aired without issues for years. It showed the Bubble Guppies having fun with police officers during a friendly competition. It was presenting law enforcement in a cheerful, lighthearted way. Standard kid show stuff. Then, George Floyd was murdered in May 2020, and everything changed. National conversations exploded around systemic racism and police brutality. Networks and streaming services looked at this episode and decided against keeping it on the air. It got yanked from rotation in June 2020 as part of broader efforts in children's media to respond to social and cultural movements. The episode wasn't offensive on its own, but the context made it feel tone deaf. Sometimes it's not about what you made, it's about when you're showing it. 10. Pokémon. Beauty and the Beach. We've made it to number 10, and this one's a little different from school shootings and pandemic episodes. This Pokemon episode got pulled for being way too sexual for a kid's show. Beauty and the Beach featured James cross-dressing with fake breasts and several scenes loaded with sexual innuendo. Pokemon was supposed to be about adventure, friendship, and catching them all, not suggestive content that made parents and networks incredibly uncomfortable. The episode diverged hard from the show's usual wholesome vibe. While most episodes focused on Ash's journey and Pokemon battles, this one threw in humor and situations that could easily be interpreted as sexual. Networks decided that wasn't exactly suitable for children and pulled it from regular rotation. International broadcasts either censored it heavily or didn't air it at all, making it one of the rarest episodes in the entire series. Even a massively popular show like Pokémon can produce content that completely misses the mark for its intended audience. 9. Batman, the Brave and the Bold. The Mask of Matches Malone. Pokémon wasn't the only show that got into trouble for sexual content. Batman, the Brave and the Bold had its own scandal with The Mask of Matches Malone. This episode featured Huntress making a suggestive gesture and a song absolutely loaded with sexual innuendo. Networks and parents watched this unfold and immediately raised concerns about whether this was really acceptable for a superhero show aimed at kids. Batman cartoons are supposed to be about fighting crime and saving Gotham, not slipping adult jokes past censors. The episode was either edited heavily or pulled from reruns entirely, depending on the network. Some of the more questionable content got cut to make it fit broadcast standards. Even kid-friendly animated superhero shows sometimes produce content that needs serious alterations to stay appropriate for their audience. This episode proved that even Batman isn't immune to crossing the line. 8. The Mask. Flight as a Feather. If you thought Batman slipping in some adult jokes was bad, oh, buckle up. The Mask took things to a whole new level of what were they thinking, with an episode that somehow combined strippers and suicide bombers. Yeah, you heard that right. Flight as a Feather featured a character who was both a stripper and a suicide bomber. Networks looked at this combination of sexualized content and terrorist imagery and collectively lost their minds. The Mask was aimed at kids and young teens, so watching a cartoon blend terrorism with adult entertainment was not exactly what parents signed up for. The episode got pulled from regular rotation almost immediately. Nobody wanted to explain to their 10-year-old why the cartoon character was both dancing provocatively and planning explosions. This wasn't just pushing boundaries, it was obliterating them and setting the rubble on fire. Even for a show based on a Jim Carrey movie known for being over the top, this was too much. Some episodes aged poorly, but this one was a disaster from day one. Although, I will say, the actual comic book, The Mask, both the movie and this was based on, way worse. 7. Arthur, the Great McGrady. Strippers and suicide bombers are one thing, but Arthur decided to tackle something way more serious: cancer. And then, things got complicated. The Great McGrady originally aired in 2009 and dealt with Mrs. McGrady, the school's cafeteria lady, being diagnosed with cancer. Francine struggles to cope with the news, so Lance Armstrong shows up as an animated version of himself to talk about his own battle with the disease and recovery. Touching, right? It was. Until 2012. That's when Armstrong admitted to using performance-enhancing drugs, and his entire legacy imploded. PBS looked at this episode and realized they had a problem. They pulled it from national rotation immediately because having a disgraced athlete as the inspirational figure in a cancer episode wasn't exactly the message they wanted to send. The episode got a complete makeover in 2021. All references to Lance Armstrong were scrubbed and replaced with an in-universe fictional professional wrestler named Uncle Slam Wilson. Same episode, different role model, way less scandal. 6. Pingu, Little Accidents. I've already covered Wonder Pets getting pulled for potty humor, but at least that episode tried to make it educational. Pingu said, "Hold my fish," and went full bathroom chaos with zero educational value whatsoever. Little Accidents featured uncensored urination front and center. No subtlety, no lesson about potty training, just straight up bathroom content that parents and networks decided was way too much for a kid's show. Pingu was usually a charming stop-motion cartoon about a cute penguin and his friends having wholesome adventures. This episode threw all that wholesomeness right out the window. The focus on bodily functions crossed the line from harmless slapstick into content that made broadcasters wildly uncomfortable. Networks either censored it heavily or yanked it from regular rotation altogether. Despite the show's typical charm and wit, this episode became one of the least accessible in the entire series. Turns out, even adorable claymation penguins can't get away with everything. 5. Caillou, Big Brother Caillou. After 2 episodes about bathroom humor, let's talk about everyone's least favorite bald kid doing something that actually deserved criticism: violence against his baby sister. Big Brother Caillou features a scene where Caillou pinches his infant sister Rosie. Parents and critics watched this and immediately raised alarms. The scene showed violent behavior without any immediate consequences, making it a terrible example for kids, especially those with younger siblings. Nobody wanted their toddler learning that pinching babies was acceptable behavior. The backlash was swift. Some broadcasts edited or completely removed the scene in response to complaints. Caillou was already controversial for featuring a whiny, bratty kid, but this episode took things too far. Showing a child hurting an infant and getting away with it, that's not the kind of lesson anyone wanted their kids absorbing. Even for a show already known for questionable parenting, this crossed a line. 4. The Fairly OddParents, Hail to the Chief, and Twistery. Oh look, the Fairly OddParents made the list a second time. What did they do now? Well, after making kids contemplate the meaninglessness of existence, they decided to go ahead and disrespect the Founding Fathers and the US government. Because why not? Hail to the Chief and Twistery portrayed historical figures and government organizations in ways that networks found way too disrespectful. The episodes used satire and exaggerated comedy to poke fun at national symbols, the Secret Service, and America's most revered historical personalities. The Fairly OddParents was known for wild, over-the-top humor, but apparently these episodes went too far. Networks weren't about to deal with angry parents and political backlash, so they pulled both from rotation. Satirizing the Founding Fathers might fly in an adult comedy, but in a Nickelodeon cartoon aimed at kids, that's asking for trouble. The episodes prove that even children's cartoons aren't safe from censorship when they start messing with national symbols and governmental organizations. 3. Postcards from Buster, Sugar Time. I've covered episodes getting banned for violence, drugs, and disrespecting America, but now let's talk about one that got pulled simply for showing a same-sex couple existing. Sugar Time featured Buster visiting Heinsberg, Vermont, where he meets various families, including one headed by a lesbian couple. The episode presented their everyday lives in a completely normal educational way. That was the whole point, teaching kids about diversity and different family structures. PBS affiliates across the country refused to air it, Despite the episode being respectful and non-explicit, some stations deemed it unsuitable for children's programming and worried about potential backlash. There wasn't anything actually explicit or objectionable happening. The whole controversy was literally just about acknowledging that same-sex couples exist and, raise families. This wasn't ancient history either. This all went down in 2005. The whole mess showed exactly what happens when kid shows try to acknowledge that LGBTQ+ families exist. Even when they do it in the most wholesome, respectful way imaginable, stations still freak out and pull the plug. 2. Jimmy Two Shoes, The Masked Jackhammer, and the Big Drip. Alright, we're at number 2. And guess what? More potty humor! At this point, you'd think networks would have learned their lesson, but Jimmy Two Shoes said, "Hold my toilet brush," and doubled down with not 1, but 2 episodes dedicated to bathroom chaos. The Masked Jackhammer and the Big Drip went all in on gross-out gags and bodily function jokes. I'm talking every bathroom scenario you can imagine cranked up to 11. The show was already known for wild humor and mischievous shenanigans, but these episodes took the toilet humor so far that networks finally said enough was enough. Some stations pulled them completely. Others buried them deep in the schedule where hopefully no parents would notice. After Wonder Pets got in trouble for puppy potty training and Pingu showed uncensored bathroom scenes, you'd think cartoon writers would realize there was a line. Nope. Jimmy Two Shoes found that line, crossed it, and kept running. Turns out even Cartoon Networks have their limits when it comes to bathroom jokes. Who knew? 1. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, the last roundup. Alright, we've hit number 1, and after covering organ harvesting, school shootings, drug overdoses, and suicide bombers, I bet you're expecting something absolutely horrifying. Nope. Our most controversial episode comes from My Little Pony. Friendship, magic, and rainbows somehow caused the biggest uproar of them all. The last roundup featured a character named Derpy Hooves. Yes, that was her actual name. A background pony with crossed eyes and clumsy behavior. Fans loved her quirky appearance and begged for more screen time. Animators listened and gave her a speaking role. Fans went wild. Their favorite pony finally got her moment. Then, people started pointing out the obvious problem. A character literally named Derpy with crossed eyes and awkward mannerisms looked an awful lot like a stereotype with someone with an intellectual disability. Parents and advocacy groups raised valid concerns, and honestly, they had a point. Networks scrambled to fix it, altering her voice and cutting scenes in later broadcasts. After watching cartoons tackle terrorism and child death, who would have predicted a clumsy pony would cause the biggest stir? Sometimes the quietest controversies hit the hardest. And sometimes naming a character Derpy turns out to be a really bad call. And there you have it, friends. 25 cartoon episodes so dark they probably left a generation of kids needing therapy. From episodes that got banned for being too intense, to ones that somehow aired on primetime TV and scarred millions, these shows really didn't hold back. What's wild is that most of these were greenlit, produced, and aired before anyone stopped to ask, should we really be showing this to 8-year-olds? Apparently not. If you enjoyed this trip down traumatic memory lane, make sure to check out our other video, 25 controversial banned cartoons that were actually made. It's a deep dive into cartoons that pushed boundaries so far, they got pulled from the air completely. And if you need something a little lighter after all this darkness, watch 25 smart tricks that'll change your life. Trust me, you'll thank me later. I'll drop both in the descriptions below. That's it for today. If you had fun getting gutted all over again, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on any of our content. I'll see you in the next one.